Sometimes, as humans, we can't get out of our own way. We like to constantly change things, for better or for worse, to put our own unique stamp on life. Many of life's greatest inventions have been born through this process, but every once in a while, these status quo altering changes are detrimental to simple and foundational ideas. Changes that set a single sport back decades, leaving an entire country pondering if we'll ever reach the highs in that sport as every other sport we compete in. Ever wonder why US soccer is so far behind the rest of the world? This is what you don't know about the US soccer war. Welcome to What You Don't Know About Sports, where we delve into the forgotten stories, teams, and athletes of sports history and question widely held takes on today's sports. I'm Blake, and this is Matt.
Howdy.
Today, we're going to talk to you about one of the definite reasons as to why the United States is nowhere near an international soccer powerhouse, and that is the U.S. soccer war. Matt, when I say the words international soccer powerhouse, who, I guess, do you think of?
Not the United States, because obviously you just said it in the intro, but
not even close.
We're not there. Not as far off as some would have us believe, but we are definitely not there. For whatever reason, England pops in my head. It's the birthplace of the sport.
Motherland.
Most famous league is the Premier League. The most valued franchises, I think, are in the Premier League as well. It's where most of the money pumps in. That's where my head instantly goes. But then obviously, Brazil and Argentina down in South America. Our fellow American friends are obviously there too. So, but not the USA in this one particular instance.
That's where I was getting with this, actually. Definitely not the United States. It's UEFA, it's Europe, and it's South America. And you don't really think of Uruguay as an international soccer powerhouse, but they are the third of the only three countries in South America to have ever won a World Cup. They have two. They won the first one. They hosted and won the very first World Cup, and then Argentina and Brazil, obviously. Germany and Italy are right behind Brazil for all-time World Cup wins. So, and they have pretty good domestic leagues also. France being the defending champion as of this recording. The 2022 World Cup has not yet been decided, and so France is still the reigning champion. Still got a chance to win. We'll see how that goes in a couple weeks from now. But I think of Spain in a sense, club-wise, but they probably have two of the five most famous soccer clubs in the world, at least top 10 maybe. But other than that, their domestic league is not very competitive.
Spain economically is the issue there. Countrywide, they don't have the same finances that England and Germany. Italy has run afoul of that lately too. Here in the 21st century, especially this decade, they've gotten hit with some economic issues that have hurt their sports clubs. Spain is what would happen if the Yankees and Red Sox or the Yankees and Dodgers were left just completely alone to spin and go crazy how they would want to. It would completely destroy the rest of the league. Which is what's happened in Spain. But yeah, domestically it's that way. But international, they've got the firepower too. Those are the countries we've listed are the contenders for any international tournament. Pretty much every single time. If you went and bet on one of them, you're betting on a winner. So you're going to win at some point.
That's a good starting place. That's a good starting place. If you start with that list of previous World Cup winners, you're off to a good start.
You're going to find one. Yeah.
And of course, if you bet on the United States to win the World Cup, We're not quite there yet, but we're going to tell you multiple reasons why we think we are so far behind. I don't think it's a question in my mind anymore as to why United States is so far behind in soccer, and why there's a ton of potential for them to catch up very, very quickly. But we've got to start in 1921. We got to start over 100 years ago when the first domestic United States professional soccer league was formed. The American Soccer League was established in 1921, and over time, there would eventually be 4 different renditions of the ASL. They just kept using the name. Once it died, they would open a soccer league, call it the ASL again, and then just keep moving. The first secretary of the ASL was a man named Thomas Cahill. He actually founded the United States Football Association. I will explain where that came from in a minute. And he was the first head coach of the U.S. national team, which, again, way back in the day, the United States did finish third in the inaugural World Cup in Uruguay. So we haven't always been terrible. But if we're talking in terms of the 20s, like this story is going to go, we are going to get bad really quick. So going forward, the ASL only covered portions of the Northeast at its outset, like New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, I believe. The ASL actually formed between 2 lower-level semi-pro leagues called the National Association Football League and the Southern New England Soccer League. And at the time, in 1921, professional soccer, or in the early 20s, I should say, professional soccer was popular enough, at least in that area, to rival the National Football League. Yes, American football. They were that popular. Kind of hard to think now because of the way we view soccer as a country today. But if you think about the time period that they were in with immigration and that sort of thing, lots of people from overseas coming to live in the United States, they brought the sport with them. And it became incredibly popular, incredibly fast.
Yeah, and this is why I love this story. It intertwines with just regular history so well, because the growth of soccer originally comes from that immigration throughout the Roaring '20s and that post World War I era. And so the one thing I think is interesting here is that we had one league called the Soccer League and one league called the Football League. And I want all the hipsters out there that want to call this thing football versus soccer. I just want to bring up 2 points tangentially related to this story. Number one, soccer is a British word, so they can go get over it. They created the word and we just borrowed it. So that's their fault. And number two, it's okay that we call our sport football because this football and rugby football they both called football and they just got differentiated in rule sets. Like rugby it's not Australian rules, but it had a different
Australian rules football, yeah.
Football. Okay, and so then you have Football Association football, and then our football is just from rugby. So it's okay, Europeans, that we call it football because it's just an evolution of the game you're currently playing, and you called it soccer first. So get over it.
Everybody relax. Just say Aaron Rodgers, RELAX.
I mean, I'm not going to say anything Aaron Rodgers said, but
just relax.
I am immunized. So the other thing is that I think it's interesting that this is like a flashpoint, one of those history things where something could go completely different. So it was rivaling the NFL, not necessarily college football at the time, it should be noted, which was more popular than the NFL. But like, if it beats the NFL, then what happens? Because it very well could have. Like, the sports landscape was empty from October to March, right? And this could have filled that void in place of football. That would have been a different world completely.
What a world we would live in if our main commodity one of our main sports commodities have been soccer for the last 100 years. Like we may never lose an international tournament. Like
We would
the
have.
domination that we do in every other sport, regionally or internationally. Just imagine.
Well, what sport do we lose? I mean, we obviously football. So does football not exist in the way that we know it? Is it only like an amateur college sport? Does it stay
Maybe.
minor league in that way? Um, does this somehow become, with mild weather, a winter sport? And even though basketball was made to be indoors, everybody's just like, I'd rather go kick a ball outside. Like, what do we also lose in turn by doing soccer? I don't know. Anyway,
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
food for thought.
Food for thought, people. So going forward, the United States Football Association that I mentioned earlier is what we know today as U.S. Soccer, or the U.S. Soccer Federation. It was founded as the USFA, and it was adopted by FIFA the same year, 1913. The USFA added soccer to the name in 1945, becoming the United States Soccer Football Association. And then later down the road, they dropped the name football entirely, which is how we got the USSF. They changed the association to federation, and that is what we know as U.S. Soccer, or the U.S. Soccer Federation today. This whole issue stemmed from the ASL and the USFA clashing in the 20s. This was a golden age of soccer, by the way. We kind of touched on it already, but the 20s was a golden age of soccer in the United States. Top soccer matches would outdraw Major League Baseball games, which was still considered to be the most popular sport in the United States at the time. Basically, ASL teams were owned by rich people, obviously, and instead of being able to travel a ton like you do today, of course, traveling in the 20s was a lot more difficult. And so the USFA held what's called the US Open Cup for soccer. Before 2020 and 2021, it had been running consecutively for over 100 years. It's pretty impressive. They had to take 2 years off, of course, but it's going again. It's basically an annual competition held by the USFA. About 100 clubs attend from 4 different soccer leagues, all sanctioned by U.S. Soccer. And the ASL had a problem with the USFA coming to them and telling them that they had to participate, because the ASL was mostly regional in the Northeast, and it was a logistical and financial burden on them to have to leave the Northeast, drive or take a train, however far they had to go to play in this competition, to play one of the other teams, and then drive all the way back to the Northeast, or train all the way back to the Northeast to get back and play their domestic leagues. And so they said, hey, we're not going. So they boycotted the 1924 National Challenge Cup, is what it's called. Is what it was called then. And again, at the time, the ASL was becoming a premier domestic league. They were attracting talent from England and Scotland, which actually kind of pissed Europe and FIFA off. They were taking significant numbers away from they were taking significant European national team players because they had the money to pay them here. They were getting paid more, so they would come over, play soccer here. And then Europe and FIFA got mad. They actually threatened the ASL and USFA if they did not stop taking players from Europe. One of the best of the time, his name was Archie Stark. He was born in Scotland. He scored 67 goals in a single season in 1924 to 25. And he averaged more than 1 goal per match played across 6 seasons here for the Bethlehem Steel. If again, you can touch on this too, but back in those days, most teams were centered around a business or around an industry. And so, like the Pittsburgh Steelers today, he played for a team called the Bethlehem Steel in Pennsylvania.
And they took their name from the Bethlehem Steel Corporation, which was The owner. It is very similar if you're familiar with the way the NFL and the way Major League Baseball started. Those leagues also started with a lot of business run teams. It was an era of history where you worked really hard at your job and you worked really long hours, but those businesses also very frequently would pay for your leisure time. So you're there 60 hours a week or more, but we're going to pay for your leisure too. And so go play some baseball, go play some soccer, go play whatever. And because at this time in the cities in the Northeast, there was so much international immigration, the thing a lot of these immigrants wanted to play was soccer. And so that's where we get these teams. They would rather, if you're going to spend recreation money, spend it on a soccer team and go get, I don't even want to play. I just want to go watch. I just want to take a 2-hour break. So go get that guy over there from England. And this whole story and it starts to show up here where the American mindset of sport clashes with the established soccer way of doing things, because in America this problem doesn't exist, right? If the New York Yankees in 1924 discovered some player in another country that they just desperately wanted to have, they just pay for him and that's it. There's nobody to answer to. It doesn't matter if he's got a contract somewhere else because they can't appeal that to anybody. There's nobody to hear that decision. But because soccer already was an international sport and an international game, and FIFA existed, and those individual country associations existed within FIFA, they had to uphold the rules. So if you're under contract in England, every football association is supposed to recognize that. And that's a problem that American owners would have been completely unfamiliar with. They wouldn't have had that problem in business, and that problem doesn't show up in other sports. I mean, we've done stories where in America, people are stealing people from contract of this league, like contemporary leagues picking and poaching from different things from guys under contract. So that is just completely, and I understand why it's going to lead to a bigger disagreement, but just the initial tinge there of FIFA's mad that you're buying out all these contracts from around the world would be like just a foreign concept to these owners. They would not have understood why they even need to listen,
right?
Which I understand is going to be part of the problem.
Yes, it is, and we're going to get to that in a minute too. One person in particular, I did want to make mention, because we have yet to do a singular episode on this individual, but he has appeared in I don't know how many. The National Challenge Cup, now known as the U.S. Open Cup, bears the name Lamar Hunt.
Yeah.
Who's probably like the godfather of sports in America at this point.
The Super Bowl, soccer, just name tennis. It. He was in it, tennis. And he's very crucial in the dark period we're getting ready to get to for that kind of coming to an end. So shout out Lamar Hunt.
Yep. Part of the reason why the U.S. Open Cup is named after him is because of what he does after this, after all this settles. So after Europe and FIFA threatened American soccer, basically, they also threatened expulsion for the ASL from the USFA, because FIFA regulates the United States Football Association. So the USFA went to the Congress of FIFA that year and basically remedied the situation as far as the trading and selling and buying of players internationally goes. So they kind of tempered that down for a little bit. But then entered a man named Charles Stoneman. He owned an ASL team called the New York Nationals, and at the time, he also owned the New York Giants of Major League Baseball.
Hey.
So, yeah, there you go. He was mostly known for wanting to give soccer a more American, in air quotes, identity. He had some ideas, not bad, but also somewhat frowned upon by the rest of the world, because, like, why are you adopting our thing and then changing it, right? He was also considered a, quote, deeply controversial figure with links to organized crime and New York's Tammany Hall, So whatever that, if that's even relevant, but that was what came along with his name.
Absolutely relevant and also somehow irrelevant at the same time. If you were the 1920s, for all of its opulence and just runaway wealth in certain areas, also 100% full of corruption
Sure.
all the way through. And so, if you are a wealthy individual, especially in one of these Northeast cities, not to say that other parts of the country were absolved from this, they absolutely were not. But if you were in the Northeast and you were wealthy, it's probably because you were corrupt. And so you were part of a political machine. You were pulling strings behind the scenes. You were making things happen for you. It was happening everywhere. But yeah, yes, he was part of Tammany Hall. He was part of that machine, but also most people that we
Who
would be
wasn't?
calling out as owners and influential people of the time would have been involved in the same situation. There were people fighting it, not always fighting it in the most clean and heroic ways, but they were doing what they had to do. But most of them, Tammany Hall and such, would be things you would find in all of their bios.
So relevant and not. All right. So speaking of relevancy, I want a quick. I'm going to give you a few of his ideas, and I want your quick thoughts. Ready? Allowing substitutions in soccer, something the rest of the world would not adopt until the 1950s.
Absolutely great idea. Every sport has substitutions
At this point,
for a reason. Even baseball, and they do it the same way baseball did. He wanted to do it the same way baseball did. You're playing until you're not, and then you're out. Love it. Keep the game exciting. Don't want people trudging.
True. Using win percentage instead of points to determine final rankings at the end of seasons.
I don't know why this is not a thing. Like, I get that points are simple and easy, and we're going to give 3 points for a win and 1 for a tie, and that incentivizes you to win. But it also incentivizes you in a long season to want to tie. And math ain't that hard. You just add up the number of games and divide. It's two basic operations gets you win percentage. And I don't know, that absolutely should be a thing, because
makes sense.
We're Charlotte FC fans tangentially here in their opening of their lives. How many they missed the playoffs because they drew over and over
1,000 times
again. More they had less wins, but also less losses than all the teams around them. But because they drew and drew and drew, they're out. And some team that lost more is in. Like, it's like, let's use win percentage. Let's do that. Incentivize teams to win more.
Not opposed.
And let's keep rolling. Love it.
Not opposed entirely. He also suggested massive expansion of the ASL to the Midwest. He wanted to create a, quote, national champion where, like, the Northeast and the Midwest would play kind of like a division or a conference, as we would know it today. And then the champions would compete against one another for a national championship. I mean, seems like a no-brainer today, right?
Yeah, and this is where they fall short. The ASL fell short at the time of both the NFL and Major League Baseball, is that all of their teams were located in New England, where football had moved further into the Great Lakes region and the upper Midwest. Baseball had moved so far as to make it to St. Louis by this time, and as far south as Washington, D.C. So they're still regional sports because the South just didn't have the cities and the finances still to make it happen on a grand scale. Travel was an issue. So yeah, they needed to be in those. Them not having a presence in Chicago or St. Louis or even Detroit at the time is going to be part of the problem. They weren't big enough. It was a pro league, but in a regional sense.
Very regional.
Not big enough.
Yeah. So Stoneham would propose. Right. Yeah. So Stoneham would propose that the ASL boycott the 1928 National Challenge Cup. They had already boycotted the 1924. He is proposing to do it again and to create their own championship tournament to rival the National Challenge Cup. All but 3 ASL clubs boycotted the 1928 National Challenge Cup, The three that decided to still participate in the National Challenge Cup were immediately suspended by the ASL. The ASL was then immediately suspended by the United States Football Association, which made way for another domestic league to be formed and to be formally sanctioned by the USFA. So the three teams that were suspended by the ASL would eventually merge with several teams from the Southern New York Soccer Association, and the Eastern Soccer League was created. Now, this had like no financial backing and no support whatsoever. The Eastern Soccer League only lasted a year and a half. And then the ASL, struggling because they weren't formally sanctioned by the USFA, not FIFA backed anymore, they found it really difficult to attract talent and competition for that matter. They couldn't get players to come play for them, and they couldn't get teams to play against them. So they were just kind of stuck back in that poor, not professional regionality approach, right? Like the semi-pro teams. And so eventually the ASL came to its senses, merged with the Eastern Soccer League to form the Atlantic Coast League in 1929. 1929 is important. A year later, it would rename itself to re-become the ASL, which would be the second rendition of the American Soccer League. But 2 weeks after the ASL returned, what happened? Stock market.
Oh, yep, the stock market crashed, signaling the beginning of the Great Depression.
So essentially, domestic and international soccer for the United States, for all intents and purposes, died. Because again, these teams were backed by corporate money. They were associated with companies, businesses. The businesses weren't doing well because of the stock market, which means they couldn't afford to pump money into their soccer programs anymore. So the ASL would actually collapse entirely again in 1933. And then somehow in 1930, the U.S. still had enough talent right after the ASL crashed again, or right after the stock market crashed. The United States still formed a national team, went all the way down to Uruguay in 1930 and finished third, and then went on to in the 1934 World Cup, lost its first game, and then that begins a terrible spiral of United States soccer. They did not qualify for 1938. The international soccer hiatus due to World War II, 1942 and 1946, there were not World Cups held. U.S. soccer did make an appearance in the 1950 World Cup. They defeated England 1-0 in a stunning, ridiculously big upset. And then they would not qualify for another World Cup until 1990. We went 40 years without qualifying for a World Cup, seemingly directly related to this shenaniganry that's going on, this measuring contest, if you will, between Americans trying to do American things.
There's a couple of things at play here, right? Number one is that they got into a measuring or swinging or whatever kind of contest we want to call it at literally the worst possible time.
Yeah.
Because the way, again, not something they anticipated all of them to have to deal with, but the way that international, the way FIFA works, if they don't sanction, if you're an outlaw league and you play in that outlawed league, FIFA ain't going to let you be a part of its tournaments. You're not playing on anybody's international team. If you're playing in an outlaw league, FIFA will just say no. So if you want to play for your country, you have to be playing in a recognized league. And so that hurts them. But they had the finances to possibly say, forget it. The World Cup, like you said, didn't exist until 1930. America had already played some of the initial international matches that didn't exist in England. We were some of those first matches. So we had the financial backing to make this work. But then we didn't. Like you said, the stock market crash saps that. So we got into this contest and we had to lose because the finances were not there for it to be. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is, if you look at like the sporting history of America, Americans hate this kind of war. Like they don't mind the NCAA tournament and the NIT both existing, and one of them, like through competition, one just becomes better than the other. Nobody minds that. ABA, NBA, AFL, NFL, cool, love it, awesome. But anytime there's a split like this with people bickering and arguing and pointing fingers and boycotting this, and it just becomes like, because we've all got our own daily lives, right? Our own daily struggle. And then we see y'all arguing about this, and it's like, don't care. You both suck, right? Like,
yeah.
but
Just
it
lose interest
happens.
in both entirely.
Lose interest in both entirely. Like it happens in the one that pops in my head is open wheel car racing in America. There was a that used to be more popular than NASCAR until it split, and there were two rival series, and then everybody said, "Okay, well, I don't like either one of them. I'm going to go watch NASCAR now instead." We don't do wars and bickerings. We do competition. And so here you're boycotting, you're playing dirty, and it just kind of is public. And that happens at the same time the stock market crashed. So it's like a double hit of bad juju for American soccer. And it totally makes sense. You had enough in 1930 to go play the World Cup because we've been playing, things are going okay. But by 1934, you start to see it. And then by the time we come back from World War II, forget
It's
about
over.
it. Like baseball and football and basketball are the sports. And that's what we're going to focus on. And that's what we're good at, because soccer shot itself in the foot, quite literally.
Mm-hmm. It's tough and it's frustrating for those of us in the United States who value soccer incredibly so, like growing up playing it and stuff, and then like there's just no support, right? And if there is support, it's so dang expensive to send your kids to go play on a club team, and you got to travel all over the place. Like you just spend so much. Well, at least back when I was thinking about doing all of that, there was so much money required and so much time required. Like you just couldn't. It was almost impossible unless you had significant money. Like even Zlatan Ibrahimovic said recently about, he talked about, it was a quote I read not too long ago about how he was saying when he was playing in the MLS, just how expensive paying for his kids' club soccer. This man is worth like $100 million, if not more. And he says it's expensive to play soccer here. That is incredibly sad. Like maybe it's not expensive to him, but he understands, like he's cutting checks that he doesn't even know he's cutting to go let his kids play. But he understands what it costs, and he understands just how hard it is to attain that, unless you're not worth $100 million. But unless you've got a lot of money, you can't reach that height here.
And with the success of those programs, not necessarily competitively, because obviously it's not yielded the same level of success as other systems may, but the financial success of it being that expensive has bled into the systems of every other sport here. Like it is prohibitively expensive for baseball now, which
Travel
is
baseball.
Absolutely ridiculous when you think. I mean, if you were to tell somebody, if you go find somebody in a time machine and go back to like 1980 and be like, hey, one day people are going to pay thousands of dollars for their 11, 12, 13-year-old child to get specialized private lessons so they can make a travel ball team, so they can spend thousands of more dollars going to play all over the place. I mean, it's a cliche, but they would have looked at you like you were crazy, because baseball should not be that prohibitively expensive. Basketball
AAU,
should
I was
not
going to
be
say,
at all prohibitively expensive. One person needs a ball,
and you need some shoes.
One person needs a hoop, and everybody needs shoes. And we can play basketball, but it is the same thing. Thousands of dollars for different lessons and this and the sports education. I don't know what the actual industry is called, but like that market is huge, and I'm not entirely sure it should be. But it comes from, like you said, soccer
Yeah.
developed that way here, and now it's just kind of gone in everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
And,
a tangent, I guess, but still.
and we wonder why all these shoe companies and are like lobbying with colleges to pay all these recruits money. Like these kids are like 15, 16, 17, 18, and they need money to do these things. It's like, oh, well,
And
if you do this and I give you this money, you'll come play for me, right? Like it's no surprise that America has bred this.
there's millions of dollars out there for it. Millions of dollars to be made, millions of
Mm-hmm.
dollars to spend in that
Yep.
space, and it's just a little bit unreal when you think about it.
It's sad, but that was a tangent. But anyway, I've got a fun trivia question to before we move on.
I love trivia.
Because this is World Cup time, finally, good God, finally World Cup time in December, which should be illegal.
Then you get another one.
And,
hey, you get
and
another
hopefully
one
never
in
happens
July, so
again. We do get the Women's World Cup in like 7 months, so I'm okay with that. But Jesus, anyway, in honor of this year's World Cup, it is a little bit related to this year's World Cup. But I have a very simple question. I don't know if the answer is quite so simple. The question only has one answer. Questions will be your friend. What country in World Cup history has appeared most in the finals without winning? What country has appeared in the most World Cup finals without winning?
I think I know it. I'm going to pretend like I don't, just so I can be sure. I think I heard this stat watching the other day.
I did not hear it on TV, but I would not be surprised if it were.
Okay. Now the way you asked the question, it may not be this squad, so we'll go with some questions here. I would, you know what, I'm going to write it on a piece of paper, and even our audience won't know that I'm telling the truth, but you will. All right.
I'll be honest, listeners. It's okay.
On what continent is this country?
They are a UEFA nation.
Okay.
He is writing something. I can see him. You could probably hear it. You probably hear it.
I'm destroying things over here to write it down. All right, so they're in Europe. What is interesting about this country? Is there anything interesting about them? I don't want to ask just like who plays there, because then I'm going to nail it. Okay,
that is a very specific question that I don't know how to answer. This team is known and often credited with a particular style of play.
Yeah.
If that's what you're getting at, that was allegedly born in this country.
What color do they wear?
Yeah, you know the answer.
Would they happen to fit in well with this year's Orange Bowl between the orange Tennessee Volunteers and the orange Clemson Tigers? Are they playing
in like the Citrus Bowl or something? That'd be pretty cool.
They're playing in the Orange Bowl, yeah.
Sick.
All orange.
Yes, their crest is orange, and their kits are typically, at least one of their kits is orange. I think their primary kit is orange.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if they had been to a bunch of finals. I know that they've been to a bunch of World Cups, and they seemingly should have won one by now because they're always good. But it is our friends from the Netherlands. Is that right?
The Dutch. The Dutch have appeared in 3 World Cup finals and have never won. 1974, 1978, and 2010. They were the runner-ups to Spain in 2010.
And so that's probably the most finals without winning?
That is the most World Cup finals without winning. There are only 5 countries who have appeared in a final and not won. The Netherlands have 3.
That has to mean that you either win it or you go away.
Yep. Germany has appeared in the most finals. They have won 4 and have 4 second place finishes. Brazil has appeared in the World Cup final 7 times, won 5, lost 2. But the Netherlands have 3 finals appearances in the World Cup, and they have not won a title.
To be fair, one of those Brazil losses should probably count for multiple.
That wasn't the final, but yeah.
Was that not a final? Was that a semifinal where they got like boat raced?
quarter or semi when they lost to Germany 7-1. Yeah,
Got boat raced in
just
Brazil.
demolished.
That should count for something. Multiple.
Yeah, they did not
something.
reach. They did not reach the final. They did not reach the final that year. It was quite embarrassing.
If you want to watch 11 grown men puckered as tightly as they possibly could be, you go watch that Brazil-Germany game, because them Brazilians were nervous as all get out.
Bad. Yeah, and it's sort of fitting, not to our happy in here in the United States, but the Netherlands do have the most finals without a win. Second, tied for second with 2, is Czechoslovakia and Hungary.
Oh, by the way, I got to show you this thing that says.
He did write the Netherlands on a piece of paper. Everyone,
I did that.
I'm
a magician.
Yeah, that's the only explanation, really.
Christy Mathewson. Okay,
wrong. Anyway, so I said in the beginning that I'm going to tell you about how bad American soccer has been and why. And then I said, there's reason for a promise, right? Well, there was an article written in Yahoo Sports not that long ago by Henry Bushnell, who did a pretty deep dive on the history of youth soccer development in the United States. He basically has talked about the story goes, it was mid 2000s at some point. A bunch of coaches at a youth, at a 14 or 15 year old, 14 or 15 year old event on a weekend. They all slugged into the soccer game or the camp, and the coaches looked around and they were like, "Man, why are they so tired?" So they surveyed the players on the team, basically asking them, how often do you train in a given year? How many games do you play in a given year? How meaningful are the games? And the results, according to the author, were, quote, shocking. Apparently, U.S. soccer had a problem where children, youth soccer in particular, were having to travel more than they were playing. So, like, spent more time in the car getting to and from games and tournaments than they were actually playing on the field. And they were playing more games than they were training. So they had something like 100, they were playing like 100 soccer games in a year. And very few of them were useful and competitive, according to this survey. They were just like these weekend tournaments that didn't matter. They weren't playing for anything. They were just playing games. Well, if you're a subscriber to the 10,000-hour rule, which this group did eventually adopt, you would also be under the understanding, that didn't make any sense. You would also understand that it takes a lot of specialized training and practice to get really good at a particular craft, right? Well, they were doing the exact opposite. They were playing 10,000 hours. So they had like this, the kids had like this American grit, right? Like the just get it done regardless of the circumstances, just go out there and win a game. But they had no skill. They weren't being taught skill. They were volunteer coaches. They weren't paid. They weren't certified. And it was just a mess, right? So long story short, they end up flipping this thing on its head. And one of the things that they realized was that there was really no singular development approach to U.S. soccer and youth soccer. So basically what they decided to do was they created a development academy through the USSF. This article has a graph in it that says in 1990, 22 out of the 22 U.S. men's national team players played soccer in college. Contrast that with the 2022 World Cup squad, where only 8 of 26 played in college. The rest went through this, almost all the rest went through this development academy by USSF, and now they're all playing in Europe. One of the issues was if you go to college, right? If you like play high school, play at your typical high school, you're graduated 18, you play 4 years in college, you're 22, you get drafted, and then you start as a professional at 22, 23, 24. years old, there's no way for you to compete with the professionals that are being developed in Europe who are making their professional debuts on Barcelona or Manchester United or whoever, PSG, Juventus, wherever, at 16. You're like an entire generation older than the other guy who's starting their professional career. And so they just realized that this was absurd, right? And so what they decided to do was to do this development academy. It eventually started to be adopted by MLS clubs. The first MLS club in particular was the Philadelphia Union, who came up. They basically built a single building high school. They train in the morning. They have private school classes in the middle of the day, and then they train or watch film or something in the afternoon. They practice 3 to 4 times a week, and then they play once a week. So again, flip this original outrageous idea on its head, practice a ton, have lots of energy, go play on the weekends. Well, then they started this came about because all this development academy is great, right? Like you just practice and you practice and you practice and you practice, then you become robots. You get all these skills and then you just forget how to win. Like you can only do exactly what you were taught. Uh-huh. Well, this was supposed to be like a mix between the soccer and the education and the psychosocial skills that kids also need to like develop into useful adults. And so, because they were basically just like American heathens, then they were basically soccer robots, and then they had to find a way in between. Well, the first USSF Development Academy yielded us Landon Donovan and DeMarcus Beasley, who are both now soon to be U.S. Soccer Hall of Famers. And the overwhelming majority of this year's Men's World Cup team out of the United States came through this system, and now they're getting paid tens of millions of dollars to go play in Europe. What do you think? Well, I just rambled for way too long about that. I tried to sum it all up, but what do you think?
No, I think from just anecdotal data, and I'm sure there's some real numbers to back this up. It does seem that this process has done what their goal was, which is the way you should measure any process, right? Your intended outcome is to get better soccer players and to get them into quote unquote better competitions earlier. It's certainly done that, because those players like Landon Donovan or a Clint Dempsey are going. Starting there, they had to be good in MLS here in America. They had to be good as U.S. nationals before they ever got a look to go play the late prime of their careers, down part of their careers in lower level teams in Europe.
Fulham.
Right. Everton. So that is something that's improved, because if you look at our national team now, they're all young at the moment and they're all on their first or second. Some of them are now on their second contracts in high level clubs in Europe. So the age has gotten lower that we start making inroads into those larger, more competitive leagues. That's been a plus. And so now, whether it's the right thing or not, probably, because like we said, it is prohibitively expensive to get into soccer. And this is a way to make it less so, is when the teams and the soccer federation and the pro clubs are invested in finding these players, which is what the rest of the world does. And I know it's not what we do in the sports that were originated here, but like what we said in the story there, this is a sport that we didn't invent. You know, baseball is ours and football is ours and basketball is Canada's, which means it's ours. And so we get to do it the way we want to, because we were first and everybody else has to catch up to us. And we were on that cusp with soccer, but we spent 60 years in the wilderness. And so to catch up to the rest of the world, we have to do that one sport kind of the way they do. We have to make sure our best soccer potential players are in these academies that are funded by teams, by the way, who want to make money. This is a capitalist approach to this thing. And whether that's right or not, I don't know. But it is. The teams want to win, so they're going to invest in these young people because they can sell the rights to those players for huge sums of money if they're good enough, that they then can turn into investment into other parts of their team and infrastructure and fan experience and all that good stuff. So it is the way that the rest of the world does it for a reason, because it's financially good and it's turning out good players. I'm interested to see, because the part that intrigues me the most is the relationship with college sports, because it doesn't seem like this is hostile towards college sports, but it is recognizing that model isn't supposed to be creating professional athletes. It's supposed to be creating athletes that can win for your school in a system that helps your school win, which is not necessarily, conducive always to the next level in any sport. And I think that's interesting, because I do think there are a bunch of people, to go off on another tangent here, I think there are a bunch of people that would be fine with college basketball and football looking more like what college soccer looks like now, with people who are not necessarily trying to become the best professional athletes, but are just kind of playing sports for a school we can all root for. And we recognize that there's another avenue for the next LeBron James or Kevin Garnett to pursue. Yeah. I know the Dallas Mavericks have started an academy. Obviously, that doesn't help them at all because they still have to go through the draft process and things. But the NBA is the most progressive league, and I can see them being the first one, because it's already been spoken about, being the first one to drop the draft and go to academies and signings and getting people whenever. So I think it's the right thing to do. Now, I'm the one that's rambling. I think it's the right one to do. I think it's interesting that we've gotten better. I think it's interesting that our average age gets lower on the national team and early, and when we start entering other leagues and when they become professionals. I do wonder how you get both talent and grit.
That's what they were hoping to accomplish with the development academies, because you would still get that, like, you'd still get that social development being in school, but you would be in school with the same kids that you were competing against, who were like the best soccer players of the region or the state or whatever. And they've said that it works. Like, a couple people from Bayern Munich's youth academy system have said, quote, "The quality of American players increased significantly over the past 5 or 10 years." Another one said, quote, "The U.S. market is unbelievable, very good. The programs are better and better. You will have a very strong national team in 2026. So what they're doing seems to be working on both fronts.
It just seems like you mentioned that at some point in our national team's history, you had players that weren't very good, but like still went after it and dug deep, and that whole like American spirit kind of thing.
I think Tim Howard in 2014 against Belgium, he made like 16 saves, like just Superman on the field because he had to, and he was not willing to lose. But I mean, they ended up losing in overtime. But it was because he was dead. What I have to do. He was he was tired to death. Like, he could not make another save because his team in front of him wasn't really helping. But I think the U.S. national teams in the past have been like Clint Dempsey, grown up playing soccer in like backyards and fields and stuff, and like he was driving hours and hours to play the soccer that he could play because it wasn't accessible to him. It was very different.
And would just as soon punch you in the face as dribble around you.
That's the grit, right?
But now, not to be too takey, but now you've got a knockout game against Belgium where Weston McKennie gets pulled from behind and tries to sell it as a penalty when the ball is still right there.
Netherlands.
Able to be played. Netherlands, yeah. And the ball's right there and still able to be played. And he's doing the talent play, the smart play, try to get a penalty kick instead of, I got to go get that ball and put it in the back of this net right now.
Yeah.
Right. So where do we get the super talented athlete that also, like, we have that this is the thing that the other way of doing it that we do in every other sport, we get both somehow, right? Like we get the players
Well,
that aren't the
yeah,
Allen Iversons and the LeBrons that on some days are just going to say,
and
"You're not winning, I am," and that's it.
yeah, and my argument to that would be something we talked about that kind of sprouted this episode in a way that um, so the United States under 20 team
Hmm.
has won the last 3 CONCACAF championships. 2022, there was not one in 2020, and then the 2 before that. We looked at the rosters all the way back to the 2017 and the 2018 squads that played on the U20 team, right? And so if you think about 17, that's 5 years ago. You think about the ages of the kids on the team now and just how young they are. If you're listening and you're anywhere familiar with this World Cup, we had the second youngest roster that went to Qatar. You think about any of the guys, like the overwhelming majority of the roster would have been age eligible to play on that first team that has now won 3 in a row, but could have been eligible to play on the first one. You know how many of this World Cup roster was on the U20 2017 team? Was it 2?
I think
out of the 20 something? It's because the Pulisics, the McKinneys, the Turners, everybody basically, they were already on the varsity squad. So there is my argument against that is the team that we have now is incredibly talented, and they may have gotten to the national team because there was just nobody pushing them. There's nobody behind them. Like, they know they're the best. They're not being pushed like I think about when I think of competitive basketball, I think of like Rucker Park in New York. You hear stories about just the all-time greats going there and growing up there playing, or the all-time greats going there playing pickup. That's not happening in U.S. soccer, and it's because there's a huge skill gap between a Christian Pulisic. There's just not as many players pushing them maybe to have that. Like, they're just so skillful that they can get away with it. But there's an entire generation of American soccer that has been developed over the last 15 years since this development academy idea has come about that we don't even know. We don't even know exists. They are still so good. They're winning their age groups for North and Central America, and they haven't even scratched the varsity team yet.
So I guess the idea is not to develop enough players to have a national team. It's to develop enough players that there's competition to be on the national team. Then you start
getting like oh my God, he wasn't on the like Brazil. You know how many guys Brazil had to leave behind this year that would have been like a no-brainer, would have started on any other team? We don't have that. We're lucky to get 26 guys of that caliber. You know what I mean?
Then you create an iron sharpens iron situation. You get guys with a chip on their shoulder who have that mindset that I can't do anything but the very best because somebody else could take my spot.
Someone's going to take my spot. Yeah. We don't have that yet.
There's
but
something,
I think that's my answer.
For that. Yeah. Because, I mean, you think about, we were already developed, already one of the best teams in the world. But, think about basketball, the dream team situation. Those guys respected each other, did not like each other always, and played each other hard in practices and scrimmages because of it. And they were going to win that Olympics anyway. But there's something about putting 10, 20, and in soccer you got more than that, but there's only one striker the way we play. There's something about putting 4 guys that want to be that striker in competition with each other that's going to bring out you're going to get the one that has that talent and grit. So I can get that. So maybe that's the idea, is we just got to keep somewhere there's a soccer Jordan in this country. There's a soccer Jordan at some point that's going to be that.
Yeah. And historically, I think those players just chose other sports. I think it's that simple. I think soccer wasn't developed enough and wasn't thought highly enough that like the LeBron of US soccer, maybe Pulisic, who knows? Maybe somebody that's not even born yet, right? We don't know. Yeah. But to this point, it's been like a rich white kid sport. Like to be fair. So like the kids who can go get really good at other sports in other ways, they can't play really, really high level soccer just anywhere. And so that's what I got out of that article. I think there's a ton of hope going forward. After doing this research and after reading this, I would bet my life that we are going to win a World Cup in my lifetime. Don't prove me wrong, but I truly believe that now. Truly believe it.
One issue with that is that you bet. Did you say you bet on your life that we'll win one in your lifetime?
I hope so.
That's like one of those monkey paw situations. Like we can't just leave that hanging
it's
out
there. It's just
there.
a figure of speech.
Because well,
it's a figure of speech.
Yes. Okay. I actually tend to agree. That is probably something that is a potential, more likely than not, I think.
Will we win it in 4 years?
No.
Probably not. Will we have a better showing in 4 years than we have had this year? I think so. Because I think there's so much talent brewing that they're just not old enough. Or they're just barely old enough. And so they've got to get to the point of like signing a contract in Europe at the age of 18, 19, 20 after they graduate school, straight to Europe. I mean, McKinney's been playing for Juventus for forever. Pulisic plays in England, but played in Germany before. So like they all, to get to this point in their professional lives, to be in their early to mid 20s being this good, they've been doing this for a while. The next generation, 4 years from now, those kids on those other teams will have had the time to do that. That team should be significantly better. Not only just because the players on this team will be 4 years older, but there will also be reserves, right? Like you take the starting 11 out right now, like we've seen that. We don't have a striker. I say we. The United States men's national team does not have a true striker.
Right. This is the one time in sports you can say we.
Because I was born here, yeah.
International sports, you can say we. It's okay.
Our two center backs are in their 30s. That's the best we got yet? No shot, right? That's the best we had today. But that's not going to be a going forward of it. Like we have to get younger. And so I see lots of promise. I see lots of hope. I think MLS is doing the right thing. I think US Soccer is doing a great thing. I think we cut ourselves really early 100 years ago, and we're still paying for it. But I hope that through all this rambling, one, that you're still listening, and two,
thank you.
that you understand that these are big reasons why the U.S. soccer is behind the rest of the world and why there's promise going forward in the spirit of the World Cup. Last thoughts, anything? I think we talked a lot.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much got it licked there. I love origin stories, and this is a pretty good one for the league, and then why it fell apart, and we were in the darkness, but also hope, which is a good capstone there. I think soccer is an interesting sport. It does not everybody's favorite. A lot of people bored by it.
Yeah, you play 90 minutes and you end in a dive.
Not an invalid criticism of the game.
No, it is invalid. But go ahead.
No.
Yes.
A 0-0
if you're not entertained without scoring, you're the person who hates 7-3 football games. You're the person who hates.
But people do.
You're the person who hates Virginia basketball. Like you hate defense.
First of all,
you hate strategy. Yes. Hey guys, we gotta cut it. This has been a great episode.
Virginia basketball is not defense. Virginia basketball is it's a live action. It's art. It's an art installment.
Live action.
Yeah, everything's live action. It is an art installation. It is live art, and it is meant to mimic the way you would suffocate an individual. That is what Virginia basketball is. It's not. No,
that's defensive.
It's defense. Fine. You're not supposed to play defense against yourself, which is the problem with Virginia basketball. Score.
That's the problem.
Yes, on purpose, which is weird. Hey, we have the talent to win by 30. Let's make sure we only score 30. That way, it'll be closer. Okay, Tony, we'll do it.
Tony Bennett's philosophy is unique, to say the least. But anyway,
0-0 is weird, but yeah,
It's
we're
still
glad-
entertaining,
it could
regardless. That is what you don't know about the U.S. soccer war. If you have ideas, more origin stories, we love covering these. Anything you want to tell us about, or anything you want us to cover, let us know. We will be more than happy to research this stuff. We've been doing it for a while for free, so don't give up on us now. Until next time, see ya.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of What You Don't Know About Sports. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave us a review, 5 stars only, and hit that subscribe button wherever you listen. If you have a great sports story, we want to hear about it. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WYDKAS Podcast, and on our YouTube channel at What You Don't Know About Sports Podcast. All episodes are written, recorded, and edited by us. Stay tuned for the next episode.